What if the struggle you are in right now is not a sign of delay, but a signal of delivery? What if heaven has already approved your miracle, and the only thing left is for your faith to recognize the signs? Tonight I want you to listen carefully, because when God is about to give you something big, He always sends signs first. If you miss them, you may misinterpret your season. But if you see them, your life will never be the same again. Beloved, hear me carefully today. Many people pray for blessing, but very few recognize the season just before the blessing arrives. That season does not look like celebration. It looks like pressure. It feels like delay. And sometimes it sounds like silence. But I have come with a message of hope and revelation. When God is about to give you something big, He will never leave you without signs. Do not turn away now. Do not lose heart now. Because what you are experiencing may not be the enemy attacking. It may be God preparing. Stay with me until the end. Because if you understand these signs, you will stop complaining about your season and start cooperating with your miracle. Pressure is one of the most misunderstood experiences in the life of faith. Many people assume that when pressure increases, something is wrong, that God has stepped away, that opposition means rejection. But in the spiritual realm, pressure is often the clearest indication that promotion is near. Before God lifts a person publicly, He works on them privately, and that private work almost always feels uncomfortable. Pressure is not punishment. Pressure is preparation. Think about how growth works in every area of life. Muscles only grow when they are placed under resistance. Diamonds are formed under intense pressure deep beneath the surface of the earth. A seed cannot become a tree unless it is first pressed into the ground, hidden, confined, and surrounded by darkness. In the same way, when God is preparing to release something big into your life, He allows pressure to surround you, not to crush you, but to increase your capacity to carry what is coming. Many people pray for elevation but resist the season that produces it. They want the crown without the weight, the victory without the battle, the promotion without the process. But God is too wise and too loving to give you tomorrow's responsibility with today's strength. So He allows pressure to stretch you. Pressure reveals what is inside you. When life is easy, faith is comfortable. When pressure comes, faith must become real. Pressure also exposes dependence. When everything is going well, it is easy to rely on your own ability, your own experience, your own understanding. But when pressure increases, human strength reaches its limit. That is the moment God is looking for. Not because He wants you to fail, but because He wants you to learn where your true source is. Promotion in the kingdom of God is never about self-sufficiency. It is always about God dependence. Sometimes the pressure comes from responsibility. You find yourself carrying more than you used to. More people depend on you. More decisions rest on your shoulders. More expectations surround your life. You may ask, why does it feel like everything is being added at once? But responsibility often arrives before the title. God trains you in the weight of the assignment before He announces the position. What feels overwhelming now is actually rehearsal for what is coming. Sometimes the pressure comes from opposition. Resistance increases. Misunderstandings multiply. Doors that used to open easily now require prayer and persistence. But opposition does not always mean you are going the wrong way. Often it means you are moving towards something valuable. Resistance only rises when something significant is at stake. No one fights over something that has no value. Pressure from opposition can be a sign that the enemy recognizes what God is preparing to release. Pressure also comes through delay. You believed the promise. You took the step of faith. You obeyed. And then time passed. Waiting became uncomfortable. Questions began to surface. Delay creates pressure because it forces faith to operate without visible evidence. But delay is not denial. Delay is often alignment. God is not only arranging the blessing, He is arranging you, the people connected to you, and the timing that will bring maximum impact. Under pressure, character is refined, pride is confronted, patience is developed, motives are purified. God is not just interested in what you will do when you are promoted. He is deeply concerned with who you will be when you get there. Pressure has a way of removing what cannot go forward. Attitudes that were tolerated before become unbearable under pressure. And God uses that discomfort to bring transformation. Pressure also sharpens spiritual sensitivity. When things are easy, prayer can become casual. But under pressure, prayer becomes desperate, focused, and sincere. You listen more carefully. You depend more deeply. You begin to recognize God's voice with greater clarity. Many people testify that their greatest spiritual growth did not happen during seasons of comfort, but during seasons when pressure drove them to seek God with all their heart. It is important to understand that pressure has levels. God does not allow pressure beyond what He has already placed inside you. The pressure you are experiencing is not greater than the grace that is available to you. If the pressure is present, it is because the strength to endure it has already been deposited within you, even if you have not fully discovered it yet. Pressure reveals strength you did not know you had. Another reason pressure precedes promotion is because promotion changes visibility. When God elevates you, more eyes are on you. More voices speak into your life. More influence flows through you. Pressure prepares you to remain steady when attention increases. Without pressure, promotion could destroy humility. Without pressure, influence could corrupt character. God uses pressure to anchor you so that when you rise, you do not drift. Pressure also teaches discernment. In difficult seasons, you learn which voices to listen to and which to ignore. You learn the difference between helpful counsel and distracting noise. You learn to recognize what aligns with God's purpose and what merely appeals to emotion. Promotion requires discernment, and pressure is the classroom where that lesson is taught. Many people try to escape pressure instead of learning from it. They pray for relief when they should be praying for revelation. They ask God to remove the weight when God is trying to increase their strength. When pressure comes, the right question is not how do I get out, but what is God developing in me? The pressure is temporary, but the growth it produces is permanent. Pressure also forces alignment with purpose. It strips away distractions. Things that once seemed important lose their appeal. Under pressure, priorities become clear. Focus sharpens. You stop wasting energy on what does not matter. Promotion requires focus, and pressure removes what divides attention. If you look back over your life, you may notice a pattern. The greatest shifts were preceded by the hardest seasons. The moments that changed your direction were often born out of discomfort. The doors that transformed your future were approached through pressure-filled corridors. This is not coincidence, it is design. Pressure does not mean God is absent. Often it means God is close, actively involved, carefully shaping, precisely measuring, intentionally preparing. Pressure is evidence that your life is in motion, that something is being formed, that you are moving from potential toward fulfillment. When pressure increases, it is often because heaven is getting you ready to stand in a place you have never stood before, carry what you have never carried before, and walk in dimensions you have never walked in before, because promotion changes not only where you stand but how you live, how you think, how you respond, and how you trust. And pressure is the environment where those inner changes begin to take root and expand and strengthen until what is inside you matches what God is about to place upon you. When God is preparing to release something significant, His first focus is never the situation around you, but the condition within you. Many people assume that breakthrough begins when circumstances change. But in the order of the Spirit, transformation always begins on the inside. God understands that a changed situation without a changed person will eventually return to the same struggle. That is why He works on you before He works for you. You may find yourself praying for external answers while God is dealing with internal foundations. You ask for open doors, but He addresses your mindset. You ask for increase, but He addresses your heart. You ask for speed, but He addresses your patience. This can feel confusing because it seems like God is ignoring your request, but in reality He is protecting the future He has planned for you. What God is preparing to give you requires a version of you that is stronger, wiser, and more spiritually grounded than you were before. Inner change is often the hardest work because it cannot be seen or measured easily. People can celebrate visible success, but few appreciate the invisible process of becoming. God, however, is deeply invested in who you are becoming. Before He entrusts you with greater influence, He develops humility. Before He entrusts you with greater authority, He builds obedience. Before He entrusts you with greater resources, He forms stewardship in your heart. Many delays are not about timing, but about readiness. God is never late, but He will wait until your inner life can sustain the outer blessing. If He changed your situation too early, it could expose weaknesses that would harm you. That is why God sometimes allows you to remain in an uncomfortable place longer than you expected. That place becomes a workshop where faith is refined, motives are examined, and spiritual muscles are strengthened. One of the first areas God works on is vision. You may have been content with small thinking, limited expectations, or fear-based decisions. But God cannot place something big into a narrow perspective. So He stretches your vision through challenges that force you to think differently. When familiar methods stop working, you are pushed to seek deeper wisdom. When your own understanding fails, you learn to trust God's guidance more fully. God also works on emotional maturity. Immaturity reacts, maturity responds. When something big is coming, God allows situations that test your emotional responses. He exposes anger, insecurity, fear, and pride, not to shame you, but to heal you. Emotional wounds that were manageable in small seasons become dangerous in larger ones. God heals what you hide and strengthens what you surrender. Another area of inner work is faith. Faith is not just belief. It is trust developed over time. God often allows situations where there is no quick answer so that faith can deepen. When you can no longer rely on immediate results, you learn to rely on God's character. This kind of faith is essential for carrying long-term promises. Quick faith collapses under pressure, but tested faith becomes unshakable. God also works on obedience in small things. Before you are entrusted with greater responsibility, God watches how you respond to simple instructions. Obedience reveals trust. It shows that you are willing to follow God's direction even when you do not fully understand it. Many people want God to explain the future before they obey, but obedience that depends on explanation is not obedience at all. God develops a heart that says yes before knowing all the details. As God works on you, He often addresses identity. He wants you to know who you are in Him, not in your achievements, relationships, or circumstances. If your identity is tied to what you do or what you have, promotion can become a trap. God establishes identity so that when circumstances change, your sense of worth remains stable. This inner security allows you to lead, serve, and give without fear. There are seasons when it feels like nothing around you is improving, but everything inside you is changing. Your prayers become deeper, your understanding becomes clearer, your discernment becomes sharper. You may not see immediate results, but growth is taking place beneath the surface. Just as roots grow before fruit appears, God strengthens your inner life before allowing visible increase. This inner work often happens through repetition. God allows similar challenges to appear again and again until your response changes. It is not because God is testing you for information. He already knows what is in your heart. He is developing consistency. He is teaching you to respond from truth instead of emotion, from faith instead of fear. When your inner response changes, the outer pattern often changes as well. God also works on your ability to handle relationships. Greater blessings bring greater interaction with people. Conflict, criticism, and misunderstanding increase with visibility. That is why God teaches forgiveness, patience, and love in hidden seasons. If unresolved bitterness remains, it can contaminate future blessings. God cleanses the heart so that what flows out of you later will be life-giving, not destructive. Sometimes God removes certain supports so that you learn to lean fully on Him. People who once helped you may step back. Systems you relied on may no longer work. This is not abandonment, it is training. God wants you to know Him as your source, not just your helper. When your dependence shifts from people to God, your confidence becomes unshakable. The work God does in you also includes renewing the mind. Old patterns of thinking, shaped by past experiences or disappointments, must be replaced with truth. God uses His word, prayer, and experience to reshape how you see yourself and your future. Without this renewal, you may step into a blessing but still think like someone who lacks, struggles, or fears loss. Inner transformation is often slow, but it is never wasted. Every lesson learned, every attitude corrected, every fear confronted becomes part of the foundation that supports future growth. God values depth over speed. He is building something that will last, not something that will impress temporarily. When God is working on you, it may feel like nothing is happening, but this is often the most active season in the spiritual realm. He is aligning your heart with His purpose, your will with His direction, and your faith with His promises. The outward breakthrough will come, but it will rest on the inward work that has already been accomplished, because when God finally changes the situation, you will not only be ready to receive it, you will be ready to sustain it, steward it, and walk in it with wisdom, humility, and strength that were formed quietly in the unseen place. Faith is never tested at random. It is tested with purpose, timing, and intention. When faith begins to feel stretched beyond comfort, it is often because something is being prepared, that requires a deeper level of trust than you have operated in before. God does not test faith to make you fail. He allows faith to be tested to make it strong enough to carry what is coming. A miracle is never released into shallow faith, because shallow faith cannot sustain what heaven provides. Many people believe faith is strongest when prayers are answered quickly, but true faith is revealed when answers are delayed. When you pray and nothing seems to change, faith is forced to move from emotion to conviction. You no longer rely on what you feel, you rely on what you believe. This transition is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. Miracles that last are born out of faith that has learned to stand without visible support. Faith is often tested through uncertainty. You may know what God promised, but you do not know how it will happen. The path forward is unclear, and the lack of clarity creates tension. But faith is not about knowing the method. It is about trusting the source. God rarely explains the process, because explanation would replace trust. When faith learns to rest in God's character instead of circumstances, it becomes ready for divine intervention. Another way faith is tested is through contradiction. What you see with your natural eyes may appear to oppose what you believe in your heart. Evidence seems to argue against the promise. Logic suggests retreat. Experience whispers doubt. This is the moment where faith either retreats or rises. God allows contradiction, because faith that survives contradiction becomes unshakable. When the miracle arrives, you will not question its source, because you learned to trust God when nothing made sense. Faith is also tested through exhaustion. Waiting can drain emotional and spiritual energy. You may feel tired of believing, tired of hoping, tired of praying the same prayer. This weariness does not mean faith is gone. It means faith is being purified. God allows you to reach the end of your own strength so that your reliance shifts fully to His. Miracles are often released when self-effort ends and surrender begins. Silence is another testing ground for faith. When God seems quiet, faith must learn to listen differently. Silence does not mean absence. Often God is silent because He has already spoken, and He is watching whether you will stand on what He said without needing constant reassurance. Faith that depends on repeated confirmation is still immature. Mature faith remembers, holds, and stands firm even when heaven seems quiet. Faith is tested through obedience that feels illogical. God may ask you to take steps that do not align with human reasoning. These steps expose whether faith is truly anchored in trust or merely in understanding. Obedience without full understanding stretches faith beyond comfort. But every act of obedient faith builds spiritual authority. When the miracle is finally revealed, you will recognize that it was released through obedience long before it was visible. Another test of faith comes through comparison. You may see others receiving what you have been praying for. Their breakthrough comes sooner. Their path seems easier. Comparison challenges faith, because it tempts you to measure God's faithfulness by someone else's timeline. But God does not work on borrowed schedules. Faith must learn to trust God's timing as much as His promise. When comparison loses its power, faith becomes focused and steady. Faith is also tested when past disappointments resurface. Memories of unanswered prayers, previous failures, or delayed promises can create hesitation. God allows these memories to surface not to discourage you but to heal unresolved trust issues. Faith that has never faced disappointment is fragile. Faith that has survived disappointment and still believes is powerful. Miracles require resilient faith, not fragile hope. There are moments when faith is tested through smallness. God may ask you to believe Him in ordinary, unnoticed situations. These moments feel insignificant, but they train faith to be consistent. Faith that only believes for big moments but ignores small obedience is incomplete. God watches how you trust Him in hidden places because public miracles are sustained by private faithfulness. Faith is also tested through sacrifice. God may ask you to release something valuable, not because He wants to take from you, but because He wants to know whether your trust is rooted in the gift or the giver. Sacrificial faith loosens the grip of fear and control. When faith releases what it holds tightly, it becomes free to receive something greater. As faith is tested, it is also refined. Fear is exposed, doubt is confronted, false expectations are corrected. Faith becomes less about outcomes and more about alignment. You begin to trust God not just for what He can do, but for who He is. This shift is crucial because miracles are not rewards for perfect faith. They are expressions of God's grace responding to surrendered trust. Faith is tested repeatedly because each test strengthens a different dimension. One test builds patience. Another builds courage. Another builds endurance. Together they form a faith that is complete. God does not rush this process because incomplete faith would collapse under the weight of fulfillment. The miracle God is preparing is not just an event, it is an assignment, and assignments require stable faith. Sometimes faith is tested at the very moment you are closest to breakthrough. This is often when discouragement intensifies. Doubt becomes louder. The temptation to quit increases. This final test is not a setback, it is a confirmation. Resistance often peaks just before release. Faith that refuses to retreat at this stage positions itself for sudden change. Faith grows strongest when it chooses trust despite emotional resistance. You may feel afraid and still choose faith. You may feel uncertain and still move forward. Faith is not the absence of feeling, it is the decision to trust God above feeling. This kind of faith attracts divine response because it honors God's sovereignty rather than human comfort. Every test of faith is preparing you to recognize the miracle when it arrives. Without testing, you might attribute the breakthrough to coincidence, effort, or luck. Tested faith knows the source. It recognizes the hand of God because it has learned to trust Him through uncertainty, delay, silence, and contradiction. The miracle does not shock tested faith. It confirms what faith already believed in secret, and that belief was formed in moments where trusting God was the only option left. Where faith had no evidence except the promise, no support except hope, and no assurance except the quiet conviction that God remains faithful, even when the path forward is unclear, even when answers are delayed, even when strength feels depleted, because faith that has been stretched beyond comfort has learned how to stand, wait, trust, and continue believing while heaven prepares what earth has not yet seen.